Okay, I think we can begin. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Welcome to today's joint webinar between Integrasys and NSR. My name is Jose Del Rosario, and I will be your moderator for today. Our topic is the revolution of capacity price and network deployment. We are joined by four distinguished panelists. First, we have Luke Palerm, Senior Analyst at NSR, Alvaro Sanchez, CEO of Integrasys, Richard Hadsall, Vice President for Global Network Operations at Chimera, and finally Morten Skisland, Director of VSAT Antenna and RF at Marlink. Welcome, gentlemen. Luke Palerm from NSR, please start us off with your presentation on market trends, and this will set us up for our discussions later on. Luke, if you please.
Thank you for the introduction, Jose, and thank you, Alvaro, and the Integrasys team for inviting me to participate in this panel. So I will give you a bit of the vision of NSR for the growth trends in the coming years, with a special focus on pricing and network deployment. For the ones of you that don't know us, we are the leading market research and consulting firm in the satellite industry. As you can see, we have clients across the value chains, and we cover pretty much all the applications in the space industry. We, of course, do a lot on SATCOM, but we also cover other areas like EO, space tourism, and within SATCOM, we focus on key verticals like backhaul mobility. So we have a wide view on the space industry, but also a very deep and narrow view on the key applications. So I would like to start giving a bit of a recap of 2020, an unforgettable year for sure. Of course, impacted by COVID, but many other aspects of the industry moving beyond COVID as well. So how did COVID impact the industry? We saw, of course, mobility suffering quite a bit because of COVID, airlines not being able to fly, crews not being able to sail, and so on. But even within the mobility segment, we saw some green shots actually. But for that, it was very important to have a very robust operational system, able to optimize the operations, and also we saw some deployments continuing on, especially on the merchant and on the fishing areas, which was very important to have a very efficient way to make those installs with minimal personnel, minimizing the social contact in these days of COVID and making those installations with optimal operations. But other verticals like backhaul, broadband, social inclusion, we saw them being quite resilient. Again, managing the network was critical there, being able to remotely tweak the network and remotely grow bandwidth allocation per site, manage interference issue remotely. That was very important to keep those networks running and keep selling bandwidth. But beyond COVID, we saw some underlying trends, maybe somewhat accelerated by coronavirus, like consolidation. We saw some big moves on the aero segment, on the maritime segment as well, vertically and horizontally, of course. But we also saw some very key trends for the future from a technology point of view. So I think 5G is going to be a big topic in the coming years, and we might not spend enough effort understanding 5G, cloud, virtualization as well, key for the future of the industry, how the industry scales to serve the thousands of new sites that will come in the coming years, the new generation of satellites, and the growth in bandwidth requirements. So cloud virtualization, very important. And of course, the next generation of capacity We saw a lot of progress in the constellation sides, in VHTS, in very big HTS satellites, and new trends in software-defined satellite that started to generate a lot of interest from satellite operators. Pricing, of course, pricing is trending downwards, and we think that's going to continue. It's obvious that the satellites are becoming more efficient in terms of capex per megahertz or per megabit offered, and that's going to translate into lower pricing. So the question is, how do we keep growing revenues and profitability from an industry point of view? Of course, growing the bandwidth provisioning per site, and we see that lower pricing is somewhat stimulating higher levels of demands at the site level. For example, in the backhaul segment, we see migration from 2G to 3G and 4G on the maritime, as well as more applications deploy on each boat. So that's quite kind of compensating the declines in pricing by higher demand per site. But again, it's very important to be very efficient in managing those networks and in being able to explain to the customer the value of that capacity. Scaling to bigger installations, that's of course growing the addressable market for the satellite industry, being very efficient on how the industry captures new sites, how the new installs accelerate the addition of new sites. That's going to be very important, and adding new value-added services to the connectivity. Again, cloud, cybersecurity, these kind of services are going to add a lot of value to the industry. And all of that, of course, again, we tend to focus a lot on space segment, how the satellites are becoming way more efficient and constellations, but we sometimes forget on how important it is to optimally manage those networks and to think about the details on how we need to go to the site and install very efficiently, employing minimal resources. So lower pricing, again, doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. We see a lot of examples where lower pricing is triggering elasticities. Here you can see the case for backhaul, how as we lower the price of the capacity, satellite becomes more attractive against terrestrial alternatives like fiber or microwave. And that's very important because satellite is moving from a USO kind of solution where mobile operators only thought about satellite when there was any other real alternative, to something that it's ROI positive. It's having a positive return on investment from MNOs. So that's opening a vast opportunity for satellite. But we at NSR still detect a lot of MNOs not being able to optimize their network because, again, they don't think about the peculiarities of the satellite industry in terms of bandwidth pooling, for example, or in terms of getting the maximum bandwidth efficiency, converting megabits per megahertz. Also, delays of network deployments are very common on the backhaul market. We see big deals being signed and then taking a lot of time to roll out because you know, the installers are not very keen on installing satellite networks from a mobile operator point of view. And that, of course, has a big impact on revenue for the satellite industry. So that backhaul case study could be easily translated into the aero segment. If you think about free Wi-Fi, cheaper capacity is going to have a big impact, stimulating that. We have similar cases in the maritime, in the cruise, how cheaper pricing are stimulating applications like cloud, IoT. So yeah, we definitely see lower pricing activating a lot of growth. So How does the long-term prospects for the industry look? As you can see here, even with all the challenges like COVID, lower pricing, we are still optimistic about the future of the industry, and we will see a pivot from a video driven industry to a data-driven industry, an application like backhaul, aero, maritime, broadband will generate a lot of growth in the coming years. But that's a important point, that a lot of the growth will come from customers that are not maybe a lot familiar with the satellite industry. So it's very important for the satellite industry to educate those customers, to show the value of the satellite industry in terms of building a very clear link budget, how it's possible to share bandwidth among multiple sites from a satellite point of view. So that's going to be key to stimulate the demand from these new segments. Another key point is going to be supply. The industry will look totally different in the next 10 years. As you can see here, supply will explode by a factor of by 30 in the next 10 years. Geo is, of course, having an influx of capacity with VHTS, software-defined satellites, small sats as well. It's going to have a big impact here. And of course, LEOs, and with all the implications of this explosion in capacity in terms of interference, in terms of scale of the network, in terms of managing all these sites efficiently with minimal OPEX. So bottom line here, yes, COVID had a big impact on the satellite industry, and it will take at least 3 years to recover the revenues from 2019. The impact, of course, depends a lot on the vertical, and we see some verticals doing better than the others. But in any case, what was common to all the verticals is that having a robust and streamlined operations, being able to install sites very quickly, being able to operate the current install base very efficiently was critical in these last months to grow the revenues. Then supply, of course, will change the industry. A massive influx of supply, both from LEO and from GEO. But on the long term, we are still very optimistic about the future of the industry. We see the fundamentals of the business, so the attractiveness of the satellite industry, the backhaul, in the mobility segments, still very strong. So we still forecast a lot of growth for the industry, and we see new sources of value for end customers like cloud, service orchestration, cybersecurity. These kind of value-added services will offer a lot of value for end customers, and the industry will be able to capture some of these values for sure. So that's all from my side. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you very much. You have questions already, Luke, from Bert Leibowitz. When you quote bandwidth and megabits price, does that include these of terminal? And basically, what are your assumptions when quoting monthly price per megabits per second?
Well, those graphs that I was showing before were wholesale deals, so that didn't include the end user terminal. And could you repeat the second part of the question, please?
Basically, what's the assumption? So if there's a monthly ARPU, I suppose if I interpret it correctly, what's the percentage that the terminals take on that ARPU level?
Oh, well, that's wholesale bandwidth lease. So that's what the service provider is paying to the satellite operator. Then the service provider also, of course, adds some value to the end user in terms of additional services like site maintenance or cloud or cybersecurity. That depends a lot. That wholesale capacity might be in the range of 40 to 60% of the end price.
Okay, and then one more follow-up from Renato Goodfellow. I see GEO HTS growth shown in the future. Any GEO non-HTS satellite services and growth in the future as well? I guess the answer here is yes.
Sorry, some geo-HTS growth in the future?
He says, I see geo-HTS growth in the
Oh,
future.
yes, of course. We still see a lot of opportunities in the geo orbit. There are some use cases that will be best served from geo rather than from non-geo.
Okay, and of course the LEOs will be coming in with a huge influx of supply as well. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you. I do encourage our audience to please type in your questions, and I will read them out. Looks like our discussions are going for well now. So let's turn to Alvaro, our host, co-host. Please give us a brief background on Integrasys, your company, your offerings, and also your views on capacity pricing and network deployment.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jose. It's a pleasure to host this event and have you as a moderator and you as presenter. We basically have been, since 1990, 31 years already, making the best satellite communication and monitoring systems. What we do is mainly software. It's a software product that interacts with multiple hardwares. And we do from the design phase of the network to the deployment phase of the network, the maintenance phase, the SLA certification, interference detection, mitigation, so all the chain in that regard to make a secure communication, a reliable communication, and efficient communications for that. And it's a great added value, which enables to bring a little bit of value and price to that capacity that is dropping in price. So also with the design phase, what we found is that we could increase the revenue from our customers in order to sell more, to achieve and penetrate the market before. And then the deployment phase, which add a new revenue as well, a revenue stream as soon as you deploy. As quicker you deploy, you start getting revenue before. So this is kind of the initiatives that now that the capacity price is going down, our customers and our partners need to adapt. And here we have a very good two smart service providers and equipment providers who has adapted to this new area and have managed to keep doing very well and keep penetrating new market. And we think that Marlink and Kymeta are a great example.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alvaro. So on to our discussions then. So let's start with Kymeta, a key player in the ecosystem on the antenna side. So Richard, in terms of capacity pricing, network deployment, what we've heard from Luke and Alvaro so far, do you agree with their viewpoint? And specifically for Kymeta, what is your position for the flat panel antenna market today?
Well, the first thing is that I don't necessarily agree with the satellite capacity falling because as I work to build the networks for Kymeta, especially their land-based mobility product, I find personally that the satellite pricing is too expensive, especially coming from 30 plus years at MTN, where we were able to negotiate down capacity prices down into the teens, anywhere from $1,000 or less per megahertz to an average of maybe $1,800 to $2,000 a megahertz. Today, in a geo environment, sometimes I'm appalled when the satellite purveyors come back and they offered me services at $3,000 or more per megahertz. Now that's in North America or here in CONUS. If I did the same question in Europe, and this is where I agree with Luke's graph, the same price that I got in America for say $3,200 a megahertz, I can get it quote over in Europe on the same satellite for $1,600 a megahertz. Why? Okay, so I have a problem with the satellite owners associated with the way they quote, and they try to take advantage to the younger companies trying to come online and build new networks. Anyway, with that being said, Kymeta's outlook, in the flat market electronic steered antenna marketplace is such that, we look at it that if ESA antennas, can track and scan very quickly, these are the things that are going to be very critical for enabling future-proof connectivity, because they can leverage multiple satellite capacity types, from multiple different orbits, MEO, GEO, LEO, which overall, it increases the flexibility for the end users, as well as the capacity providers alike. So, it's a good thing for everybody, not only the users, but the SSOs, the service providers. ESAs, they open up land mobility markets to the broadband satellite communications, really at a big scale in areas where people today cannot get it, especially in the land-based mobility arena. These markets are, somewhat like first responders, rail, buses, agriculture, mining, trucking, even aviation. All of these, different market bases or business verticals, they're all craving data and connectivity at the very edge of communications, currently, which only the satellite can address, especially on platforms that can't support the traditional mechanically steered or phased array, heavy phased array antennas. ESA antennas are also critical, to the aero market, which prioritizes the low profile, less drag, low maintenance antennas, and better fuel burn than the conventional gimbaled antennas that are being used today. All those aircraft that are delivering in-flight connectivity, yes, they want it, but they also don't want to, pay the extra expense of, drag, which is costing them a lot more fuel burn. So okay. The overall, panels, that Kymeta, produces today, they're very critical for the mass adoption for the next generation of LEO, MEO satellite markets, and they enable the enterprises and consumer broadband connectivity.
Great. All right. Well, we look forward to your rollouts and participation in the developments of future solutions. So let's move to Marlink. Morten, as a service provider, capacity pricing trends must be, well, good, unless you agree with Richard that they're still too high. So please comment on that. And what's the impact on network deployment from your point of view?
I think I can keep the answer quite short. Lower prices on the capacity is a good thing. It gives us opportunities and flexibilities, and at the end, that will benefit our customer with lower prices. Okay.
All right. And then, so let's move on to your use of Integrasys product. First of all, what products from Integrasys does Marlink use currently?
So we use the SatMotion today. Mm-hmm. We started to evaluate the SatMotion several years ago actually, and deployed it in a few teleports to get a global coverage for our lineup solution. So we have further expanded this to multiple teleports, and it applies to both our iDirect Evolution network as well as the new tech dialogue networks. In addition to that, we also start on a small scale now with Allosat to further build upon the SatMotion solution.
Okay, and the main drive for starting with SatMotion?
I think, this could be kind of a flip side of growth and size. We saw that with lineups, maybe with multiple lineups per day, we started to tie up quite a lot of resources. And again, it was a manual process to do a lineup. We could have, if all, call it all negatives hit us at the same time, we could have a challenging remote antenna. We could have this run through not one of our own teleports. So we had this conference call with the installer, the support engineer, and the teleport operators, hunched over the equipment and phone for quite a long time. And it tied up a lot of resources. And at the same time, we might have customers in queue that are looking for support for something. So it was really tried to free up these resources.
Okay, great. And suffice it to say, you're very happy with the product.
Yes, no, the product is good. It absolutely helps us quite a lot.
Okay, all right, Richard, same experience. Good experience with Kobet, for instance. With Integrasys. For example, when we look at the beam budget, does that help your network planning? Contingencies and others?
Well, I use beam budget every day to support all of Kobet's commercial and business and government business, plus their field engineering employees around the world. Beam budget provides me with a quick link budget results from pre-programmed Kobet engineering factors. And we work very closely with Alvaro's engineering team. Basically, they customize the beam budget to perform specifically with a Kobet flat panel antennas. A lot of the scan losses and things of that nature that are very apparent to flat panel antennas have now been built into the beam budget. So when you run a link budget, you can get a very accurate result, quickly. Beam budget tells me, what the minimum amount of bandwidth capacity will be required for a specific client. Beam budget also tells me what the minimum amount of buck power it'll take in order to close a specific link. All these calculations for me, happen in seconds, and I can make mod code modifications on the fly and get instant results. Beam budget it lets me know exactly what will be required for a specific customer's network topology. And this happens basically on a daily basis because, we do a lot of first responder and governmental work. We get calls, can you? And the guys in the field are, pinging me, will this work? Will that work? How much capacity, how much power? Beam budget, it's basically now for me, just a click away, where before I had to wait for a long period of time to have the SSOs run these things. And sometimes it took up to a week to get a result.
Okay. All right. And I guess you mentioned that capacity pricing is still very expensive. So your total cost of ownership, operations has to be managed. And I guess the Integrasys beam budget product helps you. Is there a concrete kind of savings benefit that you could maybe give in some sort of metric? Does it save you X percent or X dollars? Could you give us an example, perhaps?
I don't have a specific metric, but as I mentioned previously, the impact to my usage of beam budget, for me, it increases my daily productivity in identifying viable satellite solutions that are compatible with our ESA antennas. Secondarily, it provides time savings for me in requesting and then waiting, like I mentioned before, the SSOs to generate an LBA. I mean, it's crazy sometimes, that you have to wait so long. And then, the bottom line is it gives me the power to negotiate with the SSO because they are so notoriously over conservative on their satellite LBA capacity requirements. You know, they're going to tell me, hey, you need 13 or 15 megahertz of capacity to, you know, set up this link. And I look at the beam budget and say, wait a minute, I only need 4.5 megs or 5 megs. What are you talking about? You know, they build in all of this crazy, you know, overhead. Beam budget tells me exactly what I need instantly, so I can budget. And it gives me a little bit of paperwork power that now I can negotiate and say, hey guys, look at this. You know, give me a break.
Okay.
So huge budget, right. from 12 to 4.5 is more than a half.
Yeah, and I'm serious. I don't want to say the SSO's name, but they are notoriously like that. There's two of them that do the same thing all the time.
Okay, we'll guess who they are. All right. So you mentioned that there's cost savings, great, and there's time savings, and as they say, time is money. Morten, so there are, you know, concrete monetized benefits, and as Richard said, there's, you know, non-concrete, if we can call it that, in terms of time. Any less predicted benefits you experience with SatMotion?
I think maybe it comes to people, you know, and not to criticize anybody, but we know both installers, the support engineer, the teleport operator, they're human beings. You are touching and handling quite, you know, delicate or sophisticated instruments, and to be consistent, be accurate, isn't in human nature. So it's hard to call it replicate the same result over and over again. And as we did this iDirect evolution network, where we are really using this ACM, the adaptive coding modulation, we really try to find this red line of the buck performance, the P1dB. When you can't find that spot on, you actually lose capacity on your system, or you're running your system. With the SatMotion, we know that you had a much more consistent, you had a much more accurate point where you found the P1dB. So I think the efficiency and utilization of our networks increased. So I think maybe that was, we looked for the time saving, but I think actually we got more on the network side as well.
Okay, excellent. All right. Okay, so great, you're happy with Alvar's product. It's giving you time, cost, and other benefits. So going to Alvaro now, Luke has just outlined, you know, the landscape going forward. And if I read it correctly, the satellite and space industries are developing new systems. It includes LEO systems, software-defined networks, cloud computing. And we do have a question that came in on cloud, so if you can touch on that. Let me just attribute it correctly. That question was from Rachel Jacobs on cloud. So with these new developments coming in, you have a product line today. Going forward, what do you think would be the biggest game changer that your company needs to pay attention to? And you know, what products do you need to develop in order to address those, like cloud and others?
I'm glad to hear that, and then I will go with a few points in Richard and Morten comments, which I appreciate very much. In the cloud environment, we actually, it's very convenient because Richard is here, we actually discover how to virtualize our systems thanks to Chimera. We installed in Chimera a server, a physical server, and they told us, we put a guy working 1 hour and we virtualized it, and we were, whoa, really? Is that simple? So we learned from them, and it's a great experience to learn from customers. We virtualize all our systems, so this is the first step. Then we have cloud systems, cloud, public cloud and private cloud, which can be accessed remotely. Whether it's through a software as a service, which is a new business model for us, and we needed to adapt, and this is something that we are doing now, as well as virtualize it in private clouds too. as well as we are working on multiple systems within the cloud to be able to monitor RFOB fiber, which is where the market is going and where we are going. And touching up on the points from Richard and Mortens, I believe that it's a great pleasure for Integrasys to work with both companies, not only in the product side, as were mentioned, also Richard mentioned a specific custom development that we did for them. This is how we like to work with partners to improve our products with their requirements, with their needs, custom needs, which at that time, Chimera was a pioneer in the flat panel antenna non-moving parts domain, and only they had this requirement. And we were very, very pleased to adopt these requirements as we have adopted Leo and Mio as well in multiple products, as well as we customize products for Marlink's needs as well, which we are very proud and happy to do. And this is the way of working with our partners where we engage more with them, not only with a product sale and we don't hear about, we engage and we build a relationship and we find solutions to their current problems day by day. So this is greatly appreciated from our side. And the good part is that they can benefit with providing faster quotes, as Richard said, not waiting weeks, because sometimes in weeks, the opportunity is gone. It's assigned to somebody else. So this is a huge revenue increase. Also, being able to not have queues on the engineers, not queues on customers waiting for their SIP to be deployed and to have connectivity. Whenever they need it, they already have it. So this is critical for customers to add new revenue, and also, as Richard said, Richard's salary, I'm sure, is not cheap. Cost savings is also a pretty decent number, as well as human resources, which the human nature. Sometimes engineers, we are engineers in many cases, and engineers, they don't want to look at a manual. They want to discover how we do that, and not always we do it right the first time. So as easier the tools are, we are able to do it and accomplish our work better. So yeah, summarizing, that's my view.
Okay, Rachel's question was actually pinpointed for Luke, and Rachel wanted to ask you, Luke, can you expand on the value of the cloud in terms of satellite networks?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's an excellent question. So we can take 2 points of view here from a satellite infrastructure. So from a network point of view, cloud is going to be critical for sure in the coming years as we move to scale for very much larger networks. We need cloud to scale efficiently. We need cloud to decrease the cost per megabit on the ground segment. But we also need cloud to manage all the flexibility that the customers require today. You think about the boat or a plane moving from beam to beam, that's or from satellite to satellite, that's going to be supported by the cloud. If you think about Constellations, for sure, managing that network, it's not going to be easy at all. So that's something that ground segment needs to work on for sure. Then we had several examples here as well on how moving a product to the cloud is going to ease the utilization of that product as you move from installers that are on the go continually. Now, from a consumer point of view, cloud also have a lot of value. Of course, a lot of the applications that we run today are moving to the cloud, and having an SLA-based connectivity to the cloud is going to be critical to ensure that the application that it's now moved to the cloud continue working at the expected level.
Okay. Since we have Integrasys here and talked about ground systems and it's a software product, are ground systems now, is software becoming more important than hardware?
Yes, indeed. We are a software company, and we have been a software company since the 90s. We come from Hewlett Packard, which was a hardware company. And actually, Telefonica in the 90s told us, we need the software. And Hewlett Packard at that time said, what's that? We don't do that. We only sell our hardware. So we started as a software company, and we continue to be a software company. So that's our expertise and our niche, and everything is going to software. The very same thing as everything is going to service. So now what we have seen in the last years, months, is how software is going as a service. And this is something pretty unique, which match very well the cloud. So if you have software as a service, you can go to cloud. If you don't have software as a service, you cannot. So this is an adoption we have taken, and we are very excited to grow our market, to grow our penetration, because again, a satellite is opening with the price point of the capacity. It's open new markets, open new set of customers. All the tools need to be a little more intuitive, because customers, they need to understand, and they are not satellite savvy. So everything needs to be a little less complicated, more easy to use. So this enables a new market, as cloud enables a new market of users, which we want to address. So, and as we want to address, we are doing all the necessary development for that.
Okay. Well, I'd like to go to Richard, a hardware manufacturer antennas. Do you agree with that?
Hardware manufacturers. Oh. Well, as much as a hardware manufacturer as Kymeta is, we do in fact rely on the software providers in order to keep us running on a day-to-day basis. You know, one of the other things that, you know, Kymeta has been keeping an eye on, and myself specifically, is the Sat Motion product. I've been watching that for a while, and I'm just waiting for the moment when I feel that it's ready for prime time in the ESA marketplace. In the deployable, you know, VSAT market, it works wonders, but in the electronic steered antenna marketplace, I think it needs a little bit more perfection, and it needs to basically, you know, work very closely with the engineers there to, again, make it ready for prime time. It would be a wonderful opportunity for Kymeta just to ship an antenna somewhere in the world and let the user take it out of the box, apply power, and let the antenna totally self-commission itself. You know, a wonderful thing. Naturally, the NOC would have to be observing the process, but with today's deployments happening all over the world, and especially with the COVID-19 restriction on deploying field engineers to assist any users when necessary, a completely self-commissioning antenna would be a godsend.
Okay, and I'm sure Alvaro is working on that solution as we speak.
We just released it. The SatMotion API was released in 2020, which is no touch commissioning. We just need to get a deal.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so going to the service provider, Morten. So you've heard, you know, software versus hardware, or maybe it's not versus. And then you have cloud computing, data analytics, software-defined networks, LEOs. What's your overall take on that? What's you know, as a service provider, what are you focusing on in terms of future growth?
I think, you know, it's I can see the engineering me kind of get this intrigued with the hardware. I have to admit on that. But I think if you put ourselves in the customer perspective, the customer isn't really looking for how it's done, or to some extent to how much time it's spent to use it to get it up and running, etc. But they actually focus on their task, do their business, and rather have our solution as a, call it, enabler for them. So I think when we find the fine balance between software and hardware, where this is seen as, just as Richard mentioned here, transparent or more or less hidden from the end user, so he doesn't really see what happens behind the curtain. It just works out of the box. I think that is certainly the sweet point where we have to aim for.
Okay, we have a whole lot of questions that already came in. So here's one for Richard. What is your best guess of the current production cost of Starlink's user antenna? I have heard $1,500. Does that make sense to you? Thanks.
Repeat that, please.
Sorry, okay, this is from Sani Kasab. Richard, what is your best guess of the current production cost of Starlink's user antenna? I have heard $1,500. Does that make sense to you?
Around $2,000 would be, I think, an adequate best guess on my part. I have to be honest with you, they're losing money. If you look at the various publications that are out there, you'll see that they are projecting growth over the next 3 to 5 years, but at a loss of at least $2,000 per antenna sale. So I don't know really how they're making it in that regard, other than trying to buy the overall services. But again, they're fixed. They're a completely different type of service delivery as compared to what Kymeta is focused on, which is basically all mobility, whether it's land-based, aviation, rail, or buses, or maritime. It's a different service altogether. But the Kymeta product will work with the Starlink services, in a LEO environment just as well as it would work on a GEO. But the difference is, the pricing structure for Kymeta is completely different. It's a different product, 100%. You can't even, compare the two.
And Jose, also take into account that Starlink doesn't have a way to sell their service without their antenna. So they are investing heavily in their antenna, even giving that for free, because they need to sell their satellite capacity, because there are many satellites which cost a lot to produce, which cost a lot to launch, which the connectivity is worthless if you don't have a terminal. So you invest a lot in the terminal and give it almost for free, which a private company cannot do that as Kymeta, as they haven't invested that heavily in any satellite constellations, which they cannot close the business model if the satellite terminal is not, price is not peanuts. So in that regard, we see that Kymeta is doing a great job on the enterprise and professional market, which is not the market that is addressed by Starlink, which is more residential and consumer, which they can coexist too, but again, it's a different set of products, as Richard mentioned.
Okay, all right. I think the engineers are getting into the action here. Another question from Nimrod Capone. Basically to everyone, what is your impression of actual performance versus expected performance affecting your calculations? How critical or important is it to have professional installation and maintenance on the field to meet a calculated performance? So I guess let's start with Morten, being on the service side.
No, I think, to be honest, I think it's critical. We are still there, especially I would say with the with the type of antennas and setup we have today, it could be the minor details that could really derail this solution. So taking out that kind of question mark of the installation that it's not done properly, I would say is essential. And maybe going one step further and saying that, you know, making sure that your lineup and your calculations are spot on is important for reaching both the performance and efficiency.
Okay, Richard, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's very important to, at least in today's marketplace, to have our CES field engineers involved, you know, with our deployments. You know, our deployments are still being viewed as a new product, a new style, especially with, you know, people like Martin's customers that are astute in the fixed and gimbaled antenna systems, you know, more or less plug and play. I think it's still very important that we assign and have field engineering staff available to help and teach the users on how easily, you know, to use the product and all of the functions that the product will provide. Pardon me. As an example, the new U8 antenna is not only a satellite antenna, but it's a hybrid antenna. The whole terminal comes with an embedded LTE, you know, terrestrial system. So it allows the antenna to switch, you know, for land-based mobility users. It can switch back and forth seamlessly, you know, and the user would never know it. So it's complicated, you know, it's a lot different than opening a box, sticking it on a pole, opening a box and, you know, mounting it on a vessel or something like that, and just having it track and point to the satellite. There's a lot of software involved, moving parts. And I jump back to software because software is a very important part of our system, and our system effectively is a cloud-based system.
Okay. All right, Alvaro, your thoughts on, you know, actual expected and actual performance?
Yes, I remember once that the customer told me, I'm extremely happy. I have 95% of my network in the highest mod code. And I was, wow, that's impressive. They did a deployment in Argentina. It was a fixed deployment, and it was very easy to measure in that regard. So it's critical. It's again having a happy customer or a customer complaining. This is a big change, because the happy customer remains being a customer, the customer complaining might not. So, and again, in service, it's even more important. In products, sometimes our professional products, we sell once every X number of years. But when you interact with the customers day by day, this way, you become a good partnership and a good relationship, and yeah, it is absolutely a great opportunity to grow together, and that's what we have accomplished with customers who benefit from this kind of technology, for providing as well their customers with a better service, a better relationship, and a stronger growth.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Amazing how time flies. Okay, so the engineers got into the action. I want to bring it back to you know, market and business. So we've always been regarded as a niche solution. Satellites are great, but it's for niche applications, niche customers, last resort type thing, digital divide. If there's no terrestrial alternative, or it's, you know, not practical, then use satellite. Can we go mainstream? Like DTH is mainstream, but for other verticals, is it possible for satellite going forward with, you know, software, with SDN, cloud, LEOs, etc.? Is it possible for satellite to go mainstream instead of just niche going forward? And I want to start with Luke.
Thanks, Jose. So, yeah, I mean, if you look into the market capture of satellite compared with mainstream telcos today, it might be in the low single-digit percentile. Is that going to change with, HTS, Constellations? Well, we think that's going to grow, that the market captured by satellite is going to grow, but it will always remain like a small contributor to the total telco ecosystem. So, but I mean, again, having the perspective of the satellite ecosystem, this means that there is a lot of growth to capture, but going from 2% to a 5% of the telco world is massive from a satellite point of view. But it always will remain like a small contributor to the total ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. I think the three want to jump on that statement. Alvaro, what you want to start? You agree?
Sure.
Disagree?
I disagree. I think that we have a great opportunity with 5G. We are in the 5G PPP steering board, and we see a great opportunity. It is calling satellite. So we think that there is a great opportunity out there, whether it's a MEO, a LEO, or a GEO. The opportunities that we are closing as a satellite industry in the backhaul business is a proof of it. And we see that if the capacity price goes a little down, we will be able to accomplish much more cellular business, as well as if very high throughput satellites come into play, it will be also more capacity there, which will enable 5G to succeed, as well as 5G coverage is very limited. So they need a lot of backhaul connectivity. So in that regard, satellite can play a huge role, but that's the big bad. Okay. We need to make satellite easy. If we make satellite easy, then we can become mainstream. But if we are satellite engineers talking to satellite engineers and not talking to anybody else, then we will be always a niche, because again, telco providers are not satellite operators, service providers. They are telco providers. So they talk a different language and they don't understand satellite. So we need to whether explain to them or whether speak their language.
Okay. All right. That was a two-part question. And the second part of that is what will Integrasys do in terms of product development, software development going forward to enable satellite to become mainstream?
So we are moving products to cloud. We are taking new initiatives on 5G interference mitigation. We are taking new projects from European Space Agency in order to cancel interference from 5G, 4G, 3G in C-band. We are going to cancel multiple interference from other parts, as well as making more accessible the service in a cost-effective manner, for example. Additionally to that, again, moving a lot to cloud and simplifying every process of the satellite network, from designing to complying with the SLA. So all this network management layer, our target is to streamline as much as possible to make satellite mainstream.
Great. All right, Richard, same question. Are we going to remain niche or move to mainstream? And if we move to mainstream, how do we do that from Chimera's point of view?
When the industry speaks backhaul, it doesn't really fall into our business verticals, but Chimera is very committed to looking at the 4G, 5G utilization, especially for the hybrid terminals that are coming out now, in order to supplement and make the ease of use for our customers wherever they are. The problem, though, just like Alvaro just mentioned, with 5G, it's limited in coverage. You know, the design topology of that is for inner city usage. So effectively, every mile, every 2 miles the most, then you're going to have a 5G terminal, and you're going to have it, you know, connected to the system to get it out into the real world, backhauled it via fiber or some other methods. But our business verticals are focusing quite a bit on areas outside of that metropolitan downtown area, to the point where 5G would not be very practical out in the middle of a desert somewhere, out in the edge of a forest, or out at sea. But as some of these users, land-based mobility users, come closer to populations, or they get into potential blockages from buildings and things of that nature, then yes, you know, we're constantly cognizant of the ability to quickly switch back over and utilize that technology of 4G, 5G, you know, with our terminal.
Okay, all right, Morten, your viewpoint?
No, I think I'll actually take the chance to dare that statement, saying that I understand that the customers are different, and the use of connectivity is different. But I can take my customer, a typical customer, in example. I'm not sure how much my customer need to see satellites as mainstream. You know, I think the solution might be a kind of a hybrid solution, where what connectivity enables his packets or her packets or IP packets to go through doesn't really matter. Whether that's LTE or whether it's 5G or satellite, it should be hopefully a pool of enablers, or a pool of communication solutions prioritized and used. So maybe the satellite, and again, seen from a specific scenario, a specific time frame, maybe it doesn't need to be mainstream. You know, it could be really as complex as it is, but it's seen as a hybrid solution for our end customer, and it's transparent. It's connectivity.
Okay.
All
right. So
please. Yes. One of the things that I learned over the years from delivering services, you know, to a multitude of mobility customers, is that the end customer does not care how they get their data connected to them. They do not care whether it's satellite, whether it's a terrestrial connection, whether it's a microwave connection, you know, whether it's LTG, you know, LTE, or 3G, 4G, 5G connection. They just want connectivity. They do not care how it's connected to them.
Okay. All right. Well, a lot of questions came in on this topic, and I think we all want to be in the mainstream, but there are very different points of view, so it remains to be seen. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are at 12:03, but I think we can go just a little further. So final statements from you all. So our topic is pricing revolution and network deployment, right? So we've discussed, you know, the future landscape, LEOs, SDN, cloud, software, hardware, etc. From your own viewpoint, from your own companies, final statements on where our industry is headed, what the future lies, and a brief comment on COVID, if you will. Let's start with Luke, the unbiased third party. What's your final statement, Luke? And a bit on COVID. I think you're on mute, Luke, sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was saying that, yeah, 2020 was a difficult year, and we will see the impact of COVID, yeah, at least for the next 2 years on the industry as a general, but we are still very positive about the fundamentals of the business. We see that on backhaul, how lower pricing of capacity, how ground segment evolution, how the push from MNOs and from regulators to expand coverage into rural areas is driving a lot of growth there. We see the same in the mobility market. We will see the same in the mobility market once we are in normal life again after COVID. So I would say that, yeah, couple of difficult years due to COVID, but the fundamentals of the satellite industry are strong, and we will see a lot of growth in the coming years.
Excellent. Okay, Richard?
Yes, 2020 for Kymeta was also somewhat difficult. You can imagine, for a manufacturer putting antennas together and trying to deploy them around the world and get them shipped, and then once they're shipped, getting received in the COVID restriction environment. Kymeta has been able to, work in such a way that the product development teams rescheduled the manufacturing staffs in such a way that they worked in a special type of shift environment, and allowed us to continue moving forward and deploying. The differential was outside of the country, we relied on the local channel partners that Kymeta had set up over the years to do the implementation and work directly with the customers, and basically be on video conference or on the phone with the assigned field engineers for that, that portion of the world. So we've learned how to work in a COVID-19 environment. And I think for the next year, we will continue in that, but it hasn't, luckily, knock on wood, and I don't have any here, impacted us as much as we thought it was, in shutting down so many of the different operations around the world. So I look forward to continuing in this basis. We've learned a lot. We've learned how to cope in this environment. We've all learned how to work from home and still, support our customer base no matter where they are.
Great. All right, Morten?
Yeah, no, I think same goes for us. The COVID-19 is a scare for all of us. I think both on a personal level and as well as a business level. We saw managers got grounded on a home office. That being good or bad can be discussed. We saw challenge with field engineer have a struggle to cross borders, vessels that was less accepting or didn't accept engineer coming on board. So it certainly had some challenge for us. And I think from a customer base view, we could see also that some segments certainly had a bigger challenge than others. Cruise, for instance, the cruise market had certainly a tough year. But on the flip side, we saw sailors and seafarers that was still at sea and was still doing their jobs and relied more on connectivity to keep in touch with family and friends back home. So that kind of grew as well. So I think rewind back to March, it was absolutely a big scare. Ending the year 2020, I think this is something we have come over.
Great, and the future looks bright.
The
for the industry and for your company.
The future does absolutely look bright, indeed.
Great. And finally, our gracious sponsor, Alvaro.
I fully agree with Morten. I was scared in March. Now I'm very happy. So in that regard, we have managed to adapt thanks to our partners. For example, Kymeta, that enable us to virtualize our system or teach us that it was very, very easy to do. We managed to avoid logistic issues. So in many cases, we have delivered just software, not a server, as we used to do. We managed to think out of the box and start, as I mentioned, service. We did manage to close very well the year. We have grown 2020 compared to 2019, which is very rare. But again, we are focusing on generating revenue and generating a higher value for that capacity, a higher value for that service. And it's working very well. So it has had 2020, it has been a good year for us. And we look forward 2021 as a very bright future too.
Great. Well, I certainly join you in that sentiment, and good luck to all of us. I do apologize for the audience, didn't get to all your questions. They were plenty, both market-based and engineering-based. But I think, Alvaro, you need a part two of this webinar, or the webinar should be extended. But I'd like to thank each and every one of you for participating. This has been very insightful, very interesting, and thank you once again. And good luck to the industry and to your companies and to all of us this 2021. And cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.